Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Tom, and today I will be presenting to you small versus large organizations in the Unit 1.6. This is my part 2 of the Unit 1.6, so please check out the first part if you haven't seen it. Here's the table of contents of videos I will be making on this unit. So first we had economies and diseconomies of scale, which was the previous videos. Today we'll be talking about small versus large organizations, then internal and external growth methods, and in my last video I'll be combining globalization and the growth of multinational companies and their impact on the host countries. So first of all, what exactly is a small organization? So it's important to know that there is no universal agreement of what is classified as a small business, but most countries have some sort of definition of the sizes of the company. So they have a definition what size is considered small. For example, in Australia, they define a small business as one that employs less than 20 people. And also I have a table below, which is also presented by the IB book actually, and this shows what the European Union agrees on the definition. For example, you can see here the different metrics. For example, if the company or the organization has between 51 and 250 employees, it's considered medium. Or if it has 10 or fewer, it's micro. And then you can also see the sales turnover, which is basically the sales made in 1 year, I believe, and the capital employed. Okay, so here, my first slide to small versus large organizations, I'll be presenting to you the advantages. Small organizations, they usually have more control and more managing power for the owner. Basically, it's easier to keep this control because it's not as large and smaller. It's clearer. He has a better overview, or he or she, so it's easier. Also, a smaller business tends to have a tends to adapt faster to changing customer needs because it does not have these huge lines of production that they have to change, but rather smaller key ideas and concepts and processes that they can change faster. Another thing would be that they have personal service to customer. They have a better customer connection usually because it's not just some customer like it is for a large business. Small business really treat the customers, and they have not as many customers, meaning they can take more time for the customers and build up a connection. Also, the business is considered as more human because it is that small. That means that workers will get to know each other more. And this is actually preferred by most staff. Also, you can think about, if you think about it, the smaller the business is, the easier the communication will be throughout the business. So there won't be high chances for miscommunication, as the owner will, for example, only have to tell 9 people or 9 employees about his whatever he wants to, like whatever the message of him is, or her. The last one would be that there might be lower overhead costs and no diseconomies of scale, which may in turn lead to low average costs because they do not have these big machinery or that always have to keep operate or always need big electricity. They don't have huge rent, and obviously they don't have diseconomies of scale because they're small. Now, larger organizations, the first benefit or advantage could be that they can afford to employ special professional managers, meaning that there's more expertise in the business. This can lead to the business being more efficient. The second advantage is that there are benefits from cost reductions that are linked with large-scale production. And this is also, of course, economies of scale. If you think back in the previous video, when we talked about production economies, that you can spread out the fixed cost over a larger quantity of goods, which makes the average unit cost or the unit cost lower. The third advantage would be they can often set prices which have to be followed by other firms. If a super small firm um, that delivers to local retailers um, just brings in super cheap clothing, it won't really be uh, it won't really have the effect that other businesses have to follow it. A large business that has products all over the world, and if they set a price, often other businesses have to follow it too, or at least compare themselves to that. Also, larger organizations tend to have better sources of finance. This is also linked to the economies of scale, financial economies, because banks would rather give a loan to a bigger organization as it seems less risky. And the last advantage would be that larger organizations tend to be more diversified into other markets and they have other products. And this means that the risk is more spread. Also, another thing is that they can probably afford more R&D because they have more capital. So now the disadvantages to small versus large organizations, and that's pretty much the opposite of the advantages if you look at it. That's why we'll go just fast through it. So small organizations, the first disadvantage is the limitation of sources of finance. That's basically the opposite of the advantage of larger organizations. Then they carry the owner tends to carry very large responsibility because the organization cannot afford to employ these specialist managers. So he has to handle a lot of these um, usually jobs where you'd want some specialist, which can be very difficult and a huge burden on him or her. And the third disadvantage could be that there's less diversification, meaning there's more risk to negative external changes in that particular area. And of course, another disadvantage is that there are no economies of scale. Large organizations have the disadvantage of that it is more difficult to manage, especially when it's geographically spread out. For example, if you have a business or or a headquarter in Europe and then you expand it into the USA, it will be difficult to communicate and to manage both of these at the same time. You'll have to employ a very good manager team and you'll have to train them very good. Also, there's the potential for diseconomies of scale. That's pretty obvious. Another disadvantage would be it can suffer from poor communication. It also ties into the first disadvantage, and also slower decision making. Um, that is, of course, linked with how the structure of a large organization is. The decisions will be probably slower um, as there are more things to consider and more people's opinion, employees' opinion to be heard, and that have a say in it. Also, the last one would be conflicting objectives due to the loss of control from the owners. This is the opposite of the advantage in small organization because now here the owner can lose control to all these other managers and all these other employees in the firm that also have big responsibility and power within the firm. So another thing that the IB business wants you to consider is the optimum size of a business. Um, they specifically tell you that there's no optimum size for one business, and it always depends on the specific situation the business is in, and that's something you'll have to consider. That's also a question that comes um, quite regularly in exams. So, for example, it could depend on the potential economies of scale in that business. For example, a car manufacturer on a small scale the average or the unit cost could be very high, and there would be potential for very big economies of scale, meaning a huge reduction in the unit costs if they would double their output, because fixed costs are usually very high in that business. Also, another thing to consider would be the size of the market. Is there even a big enough of a market to so that it makes sense to expand or to make the organization larger? Do you even need more output? Do you even need more products? Another thing would be the availability of capital. Does the business or the organization have the capital available to even finance a larger organization? Of course, also objectives of the owner. If the owner wants to keep his business or her business small and retain his or her control and be more secure with his or her control of the business, then this would mean that they will probably stay small. And another thing to consider, or the last thing to consider in my examples, would be competition. How much different competition is there in your market? Does everyone have a small market share, or do you already have a bigger market share and you want to expand that market share or increase that market share? So that also goes into your decision making about how large your business should be. Thank you for watching, everyone, and please check out my other videos. And yeah, thanks for watching.